Katika Kaunti 001 ambapo kuna kongamano ambalo linaangazia masuala ya matumizi ya fedha ya umma na ushuru ambao Wakenya wanatozwa, na hivi sasa kiongozi wa NC Musalia wa Mudavadi ndiye anahutubia kongamano hilo.
I should remind you about it. Each letter stands for a principle, and in my paper, which you will get in soft copy, we have tried to highlight these principles graphically. Principle number 1, that is the first P, stands for the principle of purpose. This principle requires that before a public debt, or any other debt for that matter, is incurred, the purpose for which the debt is sought must be sufficiently defined and agreed upon by both the lender and the borrower. In a healthy business relationship, in which both the lender and borrower are committed to creating a viable business ecosystem, they must pay attention to this principle. Where a lender is not concerned about the finer details concerning the loan sought, it is incumbent upon the government to satisfy itself and its citizens that the purpose for which the loan is sought is clearly defined and it is noble in moving the nation forward. How does the government achieve this? The professional approach is that the government requires undertakings of rigorous technical feasibility studies that look at all critical components of the project, including their knock-on effects, to help build a business case. These reports will then inform procurement and tendering policies, processes, and procedures at both county and indeed national levels. They will also form the basis of a strong audit function later on. In a nutshell, no government should cause a nation to incur debt for the purpose of funding corruption, theft, wastage, or white elephants that have no economic or financial value. The second letter A stands for the principle of amount. This principle requires that the amount borrowed must match the amount required to implement the particular project in mind. In other words, project should not be loaded with costs. That famous cake, the icing on the cake, should not be loaded with costs that do not directly relate to them. If a road costs 10 billion shillings to construct, as demonstrated by feasibility studies and technical reports, and you borrow 15 billion as a government, we must ask, what is the extra 5 billion for? If the intention was to use 5 billion to retire maturing obligations, then it must be specified. And in the prospectus at the time of defining the purpose. As a guide, and this you know, normally debt has a correlation with the GDP. In Kenya, we have tended to peg our position at about 50% of GDP, although this varies from country to country. But once again, let me repeat, no government should cause a nation to load amounts in its debt portfolio for funding corruption, theft, wastage, or white elephants that have no economic or financial value. I will be repetitive, so you'll hear this again and again. Principle number 3, that is the second P, brings us to the third principle of period. This is the principle that requires the repayment period for debt incurred to be long enough to ensure a stable financial ecosystem for the country. The government through the Treasury should always negotiate appropriate repayment periods that ensure that as much as possible, maturing obligations from all ventures are borne by revenues from such projects, especially commercial ventures.
Na bila shaka ni Musalia Mudavadi akiwa anahutubia kongamano hilo la matumizi ya fedha za umma, ikiwa lengo kuu ni kuweza kuangalia jinsi gani tunaweza kuepuka ubadhirifu na pia vile vile wizi na matumizi mabaya ya fedha na madeni ambayo yameweza kukithiri, ile hali hakuna maendeleo yote ambayo yanapatikana ukilinganisha na idadi ya madeni ambayo yameweza kushuhudiwa siku za hivi majuzi.